Hey guys, tonight we set sail across an endless stretch of open ocean, but not in a cruise ship or even a modest yacht. No, tonight you're barefoot on the smooth wooden planks of a double-hulled canoe, the kind carved by hands and patience. The sails are lashed with coconut fibre, the air is dense with salt, and the only engine you've got is the wind and a quiet faith in the stars above. There's no GPS, no compass, no backup plan, just the soft lapping of water against wood and the memory of elders who once did the same. You're headed into one of the most absurd and beautiful feats in human history, Polynesian navigation. People once found their way across thousands of miles of featureless ocean, using nothing more than careful observation, memorized knowledge, and the occasional helpful bird. And honestly, you probably wouldn't survive the trip, not because of pirates or sea monsters, but because you'd forget where the sun set yesterday, or mistake a suspicious-looking cloud for a weather update. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the canoe shift beneath you, not dangerously, but like it's acknowledging your presence. The woven sail flutters in a shy breeze, catching light from a sky thick with stars. You're heading east, or at least the last star on the horizon is telling you so. If you're lucky, it'll guide you to land in 5 or 6 days. If you're unlucky, well, let's just say the ocean tends to win arguments. This is no accidental voyage. Long before European explorers named bits of ocean after themselves, Polynesian seafarers were traversing vast distances, Tahiti to Hawaii, Samoa to Rapa Nui, with an elegance that still mystifies modern scholars. They didn't have sextants or maps. What they had was awareness, a different kind of sight. You might call it intuition, but it was more like a living database encoded into their senses, passed from teacher to apprentice with no paper trail. Tonight your body learns to listen like theirs did. Your guide points out the faint glow in the west. Clouds tinted slightly greenish. No land in sight yet, but that color could mean shallow waters. Could also mean absolutely nothing. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigators prioritized such cues or only noticed them occasionally, like when you pretend to read a street sign but were really following your gut. The canoe's wake burbles gently behind you. Each splash is a reminder that you're moving, even when the horizon looks exactly the same as it did 3 hours ago. Or maybe 4. You've lost track, which is a good sign. Sleep navigation is all about flow. If you're too awake, you'll second-guess everything. You'll worry about how deep the water is, how far the stars have moved, and whether that bird circling above is laughing at you. Your guide grins, watching your confusion. He gestures to the side of the canoe, where water sloshes lazily against the hull. He dips his hand in, then yours. Feel it, he says. You nod, not because you understand, but because the water is warm and silky, like wet glass. He's testing your ability to read surface swells, those barely there ripples caused by wind systems hundreds of miles away. Soon you'll be expected to memorize the angle and rhythm of everyone. No pressure. As night deepens, the stars rotate slowly. You lie on your back, watching as your guide begins to hum a low rhythmic chant. It's not for show. It's a navigational tool, part lullaby, part mnemonic. Each verse encodes a direction, a landmark, a memory of a previous journey. When the stars shift out of view, the chant anchors you. You hum along, badly, and that's okay. There's no written script for these voyages. Everything is shared orally, repeated until your brain gives up and lets the melody carry it. The chant includes details like, when the second morning star rises above the left hull, steer 2 fingers north, and if the sea turns silver under the half moon, stay on course. You're nearly home. Vague? Yes. Accurate. Surprisingly, the canoe doesn't rush. It glides, adjusting subtly with each breeze. You notice now that your guide isn't steering constantly. He's trusting the vessel, adjusting only when the stars seem to disagree with your direction. It's less like driving and more like flirting with nature. A push here, a pull there, but mostly letting the wind have its way. You start to feel a strange calm. The ocean is too vast to worry about. If something happens, it'll be slow, gloriously, boringly slow. The kind of slow that makes you question why anyone thought it was a good idea to get in a boat and sail into nothingness. And yet, they did. For generations, successfully, most of the time. Your guide tells you about a woman who once made this same journey alone. She left from Tonga, following only the stars and the memory of her father's instructions. Halfway through the trip, she lost sight of the Southern Cross and had to rely on swells alone. Somehow, she made it. When she arrived, she didn't announce herself, just quietly walked onto the sand and asked where the nearest breadfruit tree was. Legend? Maybe. But historians still debate how much solo voyaging happened and whether these tales were metaphorical or literal. The air grows cooler. A seabird caws in the distance, then swoops low before vanishing again. It's not here for you. It's just doing its own thing. Still, it means you're on some kind of path. Birds don't hang out over deep ocean unless they're traveling too. You consider thanking it. You don't, because your guide is already asleep. Apparently, he trusts you with the stars now. That's either flattering or deeply concerning. The canoe rocks gently, matching your breath. You're in rhythm now, not just with the boat, but with a lineage of navigators, explorers, silent, ocean watchers who read ripples like poetry. You wonder if they ever doubted themselves, or if the sheer confidence of setting off into nowhere was its own compass. You close your eyes. You're still moving, always moving. The next morning, if you can even call it morning out here, where time is mostly a suggestion, you wake to the rustle of palm leaf sails and a low, contented humming. Your guide is chewing something that looks vaguely like dried fruit, but smells suspiciously like roasted seaweed. He hands you a piece. You chew it because saying no feels impolite, and honestly, it tastes better than expected. Salty, slightly sweet, and confusingly chewy, like the ocean made candy and didn't. Tell anyone. As the sun heaves itself up from the horizon like someone reluctantly getting out of bed, you begin to notice the canoe more clearly. It's not just two boats lashed together, although that's how it looks to the untrained eye. This vessel is a masterpiece of maritime engineering, constructed entirely without nails. Everything is fitted and tied using ropes made from coconut husk, fibers so strong and water-resistant they make duct tape jealous. And this canoe, it's not a fluke. It's part of a lineage of design that stretched across the Pacific like a whisper on the wind. From Aotearoa to Hawaii to Rapa Nui, Polynesians built massive voyaging canoes called waka, wa'a, or vaka, depending on the island. The names change, but the brilliance remains the same. These were no clunky rafts. They were sleek, hydrodynamic, and, when needed, could be disassembled and reassembled like giant IKEA furniture without instructions, though arguably with fewer existential breakdowns. You run your fingers along the lashings. Each knot is deliberate, each beam placed with precision. The twin hulls offer balance, so the canoe doesn't tip like a kayak or wobble like a shopping cart with one bad wheel. You move easily across the deck, and it feels almost friendly, like the canoe is glad you're here. Maybe it's just the sleep deprivation talking. Your guide begins pointing things out in rapid succession. That beam? Carved from breadfruit, tree, lightweight and buoyant. Those outriggers? Driftwood shaped by hand and eye alone. He gestures toward the stern, where a long wooden steering oar rests, an extension of the navigator's body. You don't drive it, he says. You dance with it. Mainstream historians agree these double-hulled canoes were among the most advanced ocean-going vessels of the ancient world, but they still scratch their heads at how Polynesians managed transoceanic journeys without written maps. A few fringe scholars even speculated the islands were settled by accident, people blown off course who happened to find land and stayed. But here's the thing, drifting doesn't explain return voyages. And it definitely doesn't explain how distant islands were found in consistent patterns over centuries. Historians now largely admit they knew what they were doing. As you watch your guide tighten a rope that looks like it's been chewed on by 3 generations of parrots, he mutters something about the lashings talking to him. You laugh, but he's not joking. In traditional training, navigators learn to feel when the lashings tighten or slacken in changing wind conditions. The canoe, in essence, whispers status updates through its bones. There's a moment of eerie quiet, broken only by the slapping of waves against the hull. The wind shifts slightly. Your guide adjusts the sail with a few quick tugs, and you feel the canoe respond. Not just speed up, but glide differently. A smoother swoosh, a deeper tilt. The change is subtle, like a sigh after holding your breath too long. The day wears on. There's no shade, so your guide shows you how to drape damp banana leaves over your shoulders. It smells like compost and spa treatments. You begin to understand why they sailed mostly at night. The sun out here is not messing around. You also begin to suspect your banana leaf look is more for humor than function. Your guide grins. Mission accomplished. Time stretches in strange directions. You lose track of hours, but you do gain a deeper awareness of rhythm. The canoe's creaks and groans sync up with your breathing. Every now and then, your guide tests you, asking which way the swell is coming from, or which cloud looks suspiciously fluffy. You answer with vague confidence. He nods. You're not totally hopeless. At one point, he tells you a story about a canoe so large it had its own garden on board. Taro, sweet potatoes, even a few chickens. Some accounts say the canoes reached lengths of over feet, while historians still argue whether those massive floating farms were real or legendary exaggerations. Archaeological finds suggest at least some vessels could carry two people across thousands of miles. That's more than just travel, that's migration with style. You're learning that these canoes weren't just tools, they were culture in motion. Each journey carried language, songs, seeds, and stories. Every crew member had a role, from bailing water to preparing food to navigating by stars and intuition. The navigator, of course, held the highest respect. Not just a captain, but a kind of oceanic priest. They knew things others didn't. They heard the ocean. You lie back again, watching the sky begin to soften toward dusk. Clouds roll in, lazy and pink around the edges. The sail snaps gently above you, casting flickering shadows across the deck. You try to imagine this canoe not as a quaint artifact, but as a machine of survival, an invention born from equal parts desperation and brilliance. To live on a speck of land in the middle of nowhere and still think, let's see what's over that horizon. That's ambition. Your guide is humming again. You think he's singing about taro, or maybe about a turtle. Hard to say. Either way, it sounds nice. The sun dips lower. Shadows stretch like sleepy cats, and still, the canoe moves. Quiet, deliberate, endlessly patient. You realize now, it's not just about getting somewhere. It's about staying present in the middle of nowhere and still knowing where you are. The stars return slowly, one by one, like friends arriving late to a party you weren't sure anyone would attend. Your guide calls out their names in a language you don't fully understand, but the tone makes them sound like old neighbors. You recognize Orion's belt, and maybe something that could be the Southern Cross, if you squint. He laughs gently at your attempt and points instead to a more important cluster. The Pleiades, or Matariki, in many Polynesian traditions. These, he says, are the ones you trust. You stare at the pinpricks of light, trying to memorize the pattern. But to your guide, it's more than a constellation. It's a clock, a compass, a calendar. Each star has a personality, a season, a trajectory. It's not just that the stars help with navigation, it's that they are the map, and you're learning to read it upside down, inside out, while bobbing on a canoe in the middle of a planet-sized bathtub. It's humbling, and honestly, a little hypnotic. You lie flat on your back again, rocking gently with the canoe, watching as the stars stretch across the dome of sky. The Milky Way spills overhead like a trail of sugar, and your guide casually remarks that some navigators can identify over individual stars and their rising and setting points. The precision of it all is dizzying. Western navigation used instruments. Polynesian navigation used memory, and not just visual memory. There are oral chants called star lines, long rhythmic poems where each verse represents a direction or a star path. Some are so old that the islands mentioned no longer exist, or perhaps never did. Historians still argue whether these lines were practical tools or sacred myths. Probably both. Your guide tests you again. What's that one? You squint at a bright star hovering just above the eastern horizon. Banana star? He raises an eyebrow. Close enough. He's being kind. As the night deepens, the wind shifts ever so slightly. Your guide adjusts the sail again, but this time he also moves his position on the deck, shifting the canoe's balance. You wouldn't have noticed the difference, except that suddenly the stars realign just a bit more neatly above the bow. It's like the canoe itself wanted to correct course, but was waiting for permission. This is part of the magic, or the science, depending on how poetic you're feeling. Navigators don't just read stars. They align their bodies, the canoe, and the wind to create harmony. You're not forcing a route, you're flowing along one that's already there. It's navigation by vibe, in the best possible way. Your guide shares a story. One of those quiet ones that feel like it's been told 1,000 times. It's about a boy who spent 5 years watching the stars before he was allowed to touch the steering paddle. 5 years of memorizing patterns, learning the chants, and feeling swells with his bare feet before he even got a chance to direct the canoe. You wonder how many people today would study that long for anything that doesn't involve a diploma or a paycheck. And here's a fun fringe fact. There's a theory that Polynesian navigators used an invisible grid of star compasses, a mental circle divided into directional houses, each anchored by the rising and setting points of key. Stars. These weren't written down, obviously. They lived in the minds of the navigators, passed on through chants, gestures, and long nights exactly like this one. You sit up, a little chilled by the breeze, and your guide hands you a woven mat. It smells like pandanus leaves and sleep. As you wrap it around your shoulders, he points out one more star, low, flickering orange, suspiciously like a distant plane. That one, he says, means it's time to rest. You're not sure if he's being literal or poetic, but either way, you lie back down. The sea is calm, the stars are steady, and the canoe floats on. In the stillness, your mind starts to drift, not with thoughts of land or destinations, but of what it means to trust something invisible. You're used to maps with borders, GPS, coordinates, signs that shout, "Turn left here." This is faith in motion. Your guide trusts the sky like you trust your pillow. The canoe makes a soft creaking sound, as if agreeing with you. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists beneath you, cradling your journey with wooden patience. Occasionally, you catch a glimmer of bioluminescence in the water. Brief, flashes of green or blue, as if the sea itself is winking. Whether it's science or sea spirits, it's enough to make you smile. Before your eyes close, your guide says something you barely hear. When the stars move, don't panic. They're not lost. You are. Cheeky, but also not wrong. Morning doesn't so much arrive as it gently seeps into the sky. The darkness fades to a kind of smudgy lavender, and then to soft gold. You open your eyes slowly, surprised you even, fell asleep on a canoe with no walls, no mattress, and a constant background chorus of water slapping wood. But somehow you did. And you slept well. Your guide is already up, of course. He's crouched at the edge of the canoe, staring intently at the sea like it just told him a secret. You shuffle over, curious. He points at a patch of water that, to you, looks like every other patch of water. But apparently, it's not. The swell is changing, he says, tapping his foot twice on the deck. Different wave underneath. You try to sense it. At first, nothing. Then, maybe, a faint, longer roll beneath the familiar choppiness, like a second heartbeat under the main rhythm. This is your introduction to one of the more mind-bending techniques of Polynesian navigation, reading ocean swells. It's not just about looking at waves, it's about feeling their direction, rhythm, and angle against the hull of the canoe. Experienced navigators can detect multiple swells coming from different parts of the ocean at once, each one revealing a story. Mainstream fact, these swells are often generated by distant storms and can travel thousands of miles in predictable patterns. In fact, some navigators can recognize a particular island's swell fingerprint, the way waves bounce off it and return outward. It's like echolocation, but with a giant liquid piano and no keys. You lean back, eyes closed, and try to feel what he feels. The canoe rises gently, dips, then rises again with a slight tilt to the left. You're not sure if it's the swell or your imagination, but the longer you focus, the more you begin to notice. It's oddly meditative. A sea-based ASMR. You ask, how he learned all this. He shrugs. My uncle slapped my legs with a fish every time I got it wrong. You can't tell if he's joking. He probably is. Probably. The idea of using swells for navigation may sound far-fetched, but it's supported by decades of ethnographic research, especially from places like the Caroline Islands, where the stick charts of Micronesia famously represented swell interactions using curved palm ribs and shells. Polynesian navigators, though, didn't need physical maps. Their map was the canoe itself, their senses sharpened through repetition. Historians still argue whether this kind of swell reading is teachable in adulthood or requires training from childhood to master. Some say your inner ear must be conditioned over years. Others think it's a skill like tasting subtle notes in wine. You either have the sensitivity or you don't. Either way, your legs are sore just from trying to stand in rhythm with the canoe. Around mid-morning, your guide prepares breakfast. A coconut, cracked open with a swift whack against the hull, and a handful of what looks like dried taro chips. It's surprisingly satisfying, though coconut milk drips all over your chin. You're informed this means you've been properly initiated. Congratulations. While you eat, your guide recounts a tale about a navigator who could sail blindfolded for 3 days, guided only by the feel of the swells on his feet. According to legend, he once detected a submerged reef hours before the lookout saw the color change in the water. Whether this is fact or just sailors' bragging rights, you're not sure, but it makes a good story. You ask how swells interact when they collide. He draws lines in the air with his fingers, one going north, one going west, and taps where they meet. That's a cross swell. Tells you 2 different storm systems are working together, like siblings who don't get along. You smile. The metaphors come easy to him. It helps. Suddenly, he motions for silence. You listen. Nothing but wind and water. But then, he points toward the horizon. Birds. You squint. Tiny specks in the sky, flitting just above the water. Frigate birds, he says. They don't land on the ocean, too clumsy. Means lands within 100 kilometers. You're surprised at the specificity. He nods. You start to learn who lives where. Birds are like floating road signs, except Sassia. And this is where swell reading gets really interesting, because it's not just about the feel under your feet. It's part of a layered approach to navigation, one that combines sky, sea, and signs of life. Stars at night, swells beneath you, birds above, and even drifting debris. A coconut husk floating east might tell you that an island's river spat it out not long ago. Fringe tidbit? Some old accounts claim navigators could detect reflected swells, the way waves bounce off an island too far away to see. Like a sonar, ping, but without the beeping. Western sailors mostly ignored these reports until experiments in the 1970s and 80s proved they were possible. The human body, it turns out, can be a pretty sophisticated instrument if you let it. You close your eyes again and try to sense the language of the sea. A roll to the right, a rhythm like breath. You're not confident enough to steer the canoe, but you are starting to understand why so many navigators talk about the ocean like it's a living thing. It doesn't just push you, it communicates. Your guide chuckles when you try to describe it. Now you're listening. Good, that's how you start. The sun creeps higher, and the air smells like salt and wood, and maybe just a hint of fish breath. It's all strangely comforting. The swell beneath you becomes more familiar, like a lullaby. You think of it now, not as random motion, but as part of a giant oceanic library, where each movement is a word, each pattern a sentence. And you're learning to read. You've been out at sea long enough now that time starts to blur. You don't know what day it is, and you're not entirely sure it matters. The sun rises, the stars return, and everything else flows around that rhythm. Your guide seems content. That's a good sign. Probably. Today, he hands you a paddle. Not to row. You're not trusted with that just yet. But to hold. Feel it, he says. This is your rudder, your paintbrush, your pen. He's poetic again. You glance over the side of the canoe. The sea has flattened a little, like it's decided to take a nap. There's something serene about it, like a page waiting to be written on. Which, as it turns out, is the perfect moment to learn how Polynesian navigators use cloud formations to find land. Now, clouds might not seem like a very reliable GPS. You wouldn't think of looking at a cumulus puff and saying, "Ah yes, Tahiti is nautical miles that way." But that's essentially what's happening here. Your guide points to a low, flat-topped cloud on the horizon. "That's a land cloud," he says with confidence. "Sits above islands most mornings. Warm air from the land pushes up and pulls moisture from the sea, makes it fluffier, and it doesn't drift as much. You squint at it, it looks vaguely puffier. Mainstream fact. Certain cloud types, particularly cumulus clouds, do indeed gather and form differently over land due to differences in heat absorption. It's especially noticeable in archipelagos, where isolated islands each influence the clouds that form above them. These patterns are subtle but consistent, and over centuries were committed to memory. There's another cloud formation your guide wants to show you. This one, more mysterious. It's a long, low haze just above the water. That, he says, could be a lagoon reflecting light back up. You won't see the island yet, but the water inside it reflects differently. We call it sky glow. Historians still argue whether this technique was universally used across the Pacific or more localized to certain islands like the Marshalls or Tuamotu. The science checks out, but some scholars wonder how often clouds alone were decisive in finding land. Either way, for a sleepy navigator like you, it's a charming extra hint. You're handed a coconut shell with a bit of fresh water. You sip it slowly while watching the sky, trying to imagine memorizing cloud types like flashcards. Dome-shaped, streaky, puffy with a purpose. It's a far cry from your usual app forecasts. Then comes a test. Your guide gestures to the southwest. Look again. That cloud's thicker, lower. Why? You hazard a guess. Because the island under it is big. He grins. Maybe, or maybe it's just being dramatic. Like your aunt when she doesn't get invited to a party. The humor is constant, but the instruction is real. This is how you learn. By watching, guessing, being gently roasted, and watching again. Over and over until the knowledge sticks, not just in your head, but in your body. Fringe tidbit. There are accounts of some navigators deliberately sailing in and out of cloud shadows to feel changes in wind and light, training themselves to detect even a half-degree shift in cloud shape or direction. Some even claimed they could sense land nearby from how long the underside of clouds stayed lit at sunset. You attempt to see what your guide sees. The clouds above one patch of sea do look firmer, like they're anchored. The rest drift lazily, but these seem loyal to something below. You begin to imagine them as gossiping grandmothers, hovering above their favorite island, refusing to leave. Throughout the day, clouds become your focus. You start noticing layers. High cirrus, mid-level altocumulus, thick cumulonimbus looming like towers. Your guide jokes that once you can identify 5 kinds of clouds while eating a mango, you're officially certified. You make a note to buy more mangoes. Suddenly, he calls you to the bow. Watch the color of the water. It's a deep blue now, but up ahead there's a greenish shift, subtle but distinct. That's reef water, he says. Shallower. Sunlight reflects back more. Combine that with the cloud shadow and the birds from yesterday. We're close. This is what you've been waiting for. Convergence. All the little signs, the swell, the birds, the clouds, the shimmer of the sea, they're pointing to the same truth. Land is near. You're not even surprised when your guide announces you'll see it by dusk. But even with that knowledge, the moment it actually appears catches you off guard. It's just a smudge at first, a blur on the horizon, shaped like a sleeping animal. You blink, it doesn't vanish. You grin. Your guide doesn't smile. He nods. Now, let's not hit the reef. Good point. The final task of the day is to learn how to spot the pass, the safe route through the reef into the lagoon. It's not obvious. The waves crash everywhere, but in one spot they dip just slightly. That's the clue. The deep water entrance. Your guide uses a long pole to test the depth. You watch how he leans into the swell, adjusting his angle based on the current, like a surfer lining up a wave. Then he points the canoe forward, and just like that, you slip through. Inside the lagoon, the water turns turquoise, flat as glass. Coconut palms lean lazily over the shore. You hear birds again, not far off dots in the sky, but nearby, chattering in the trees. The canoe glides to a stop in ankle-deep water, and your feet touch sand. It's been days, but somehow it feels like weeks. You're not just tired, you're full, with knowledge, with sun, with salt. And tomorrow, you'll sail again. You wake to birdsong and the slap of tiny waves against the canoe hull, which is now beached gently along a narrow crescent of white sand. The air smells like salt and morning coconuts. Your back's a bit stiff, but in that oddly satisfying way, like your body knows it earned the ache. The island feels dreamlike. You walk slowly under palms, swaying like they've got nowhere urgent to be. You can hear the buzz of insects, the rustle of leaves, and somewhere in the underbrush, a suspiciously energetic pig. You hope it's friendly. Today's lesson: wayfinding without maps or instruments. You see, while swells and clouds are impressive, the real marvel is that Polynesian navigators didn't use compasses, or sextants, or star charts in the Western sense. Everything was held in memory. Vast, complex webs of knowledge passed orally, from teacher to student, often embedded in chants or stories so they'd be easier to remember. Mainstream fact: this method of navigation is known as wayfinding. It's not simply moving from point A to point B. It's a deeply embodied practice of orientation based on environmental cues and mental maps. And yes, it worked across thousands of miles of open ocean in one of the largest maritime expansions in human history. You squat beside your guide, who's drawing something in the sand. At first it looks like a child's doodle. Then you realize it's a star compass, a circle with cardinal points, surrounded by notches and markers that represent different stars and constellations rising or setting in particular places on the horizon. This, he says, tapping a notch with a piece of driftwood, is where Sirius rises in summer. When it's here, you're near the solstice. And this, he adds, pointing opposite, is Aldebaran. It sets where we turn north. You nod slowly. You'd expected something more high-tech, but what you're seeing is deeply elegant, an entire mental map aligned with the sky itself. Fringe tidbit: in some traditions, wayfinders practiced starline walking, a kind of meditative pacing at night, lining up their steps with rising stars to train the body's sense of celestial orientation. They'd walk back and forth on beaches, murmuring names of stars like sacred poetry. The sky became a path, and the body remembered it. Historians still argue whether these navigational systems were wholly independent inventions, or if they're was influenced from earlier Austronesian or even South Asian traditions. Some point to linguistic overlaps. Others insist the methods are distinct. What's undeniable is the sheer sophistication and reliability of Pacific wayfinding. Your guide leads you inland, not far, just to a clearing where another canoe sits, under a palm leaf shelter. This one's older, lashed with fiber ropes and smelling of seawater and sun. You run your fingers along its hull. This one still sails, you ask. He chuckles. Sometimes, when the elders feel nostalgic. Then comes another mind-bending lesson. He asks you to close your eyes and name the last 3 stars you saw in the sky. You hesitate. The bright one? And Orion's belt? He raises an eyebrow. Okay, we'll start small. He teaches you a simple chant, just 8 lines long. Each line represents a direction and the star that dominates it. It's oddly catchy. You hum it quietly, half lullaby, half mantra. The rhythm helps. That's the idea. As you recite the chant, he walks you in a slow circle, aligning your shoulders to cardinal points. North, east, south, west. Then he pivots you diagonally. Southeast, northwest. The chant continues. You're dizzy, but also grounded. It's a strange feeling to know where you are without a phone. No blue dot pulsing on a screen, just your body, the sky, and memory. Later that day, you help gather pandanus leaves, not for food, for rope. Your guide shows you how the inner fibers are soaked, scraped, and twisted into strong cords used to lash canoes, build sails, or even bind injuries. Everything, he says, is connected. You navigate the sea, but you live on land, and land gives you what you need to sail again. The theme becomes clearer. Wayfinding isn't just direction, it's relationship. You don't command the ocean. You ask it. You don't dominate the stars. You observe them, hum their names, follow their rhythms. As the sun dips low, you return to the beach. You lie on the sand while your guide boils something in a carved wooden bowl, some sort of herbal tea. You sip it, tastes like grass and mint and a hint of wood smoke. Above you, the first stars appear. You recognize one now, Sirius, bright and clear. You smile, 1 star at a time. Your second night on the island is even quieter than the first. The palms rustle faintly, and a light breeze trails in from the lagoon. You sleep beneath the stars, wrapped in woven cloth, the kind that still smells faintly of ocean salt and dried hibiscus. It's not luxury, but it is comfort. By the time you stir, the sky is just beginning to blush with dawn. Your guide is already awake. Of course he is, and he's busy arranging small stones in the sand. Another lesson, no doubt. He beckons you over with a sly grin. Today, he says, we draw maps that move. You blink. Maybe you're still half asleep. But he's serious. Today's topic, ETAC navigation, mapping space by using moving reference points. Mainstream fact. ETAC is a traditional navigational system used primarily in Micronesia, particularly by the Caroline Islanders. It's based on an elegant concept, using a fixed star and imagining islands moving backward beneath it as you sail forward. That might sound like visual poetry, but it's a practical, genius method of keeping track of your position across hundreds of miles without instruments. He begins arranging the stones, 3 to represent islands, 1 to represent your canoe. You're moving forward, yes? He says, nudging your stone gently. But the island you just passed drifts behind a star, and when it does, snap, you move into a new space, a new ETAC. Each ETAC is a zone, a mental checkpoint, marked by the position of that last island behind a guiding star. You count how many ETAC zones you've passed based on these shifting alignments. It's not about the absolute position, it's about relationships between the canoe, the islands, and the stars above. You stare at the stones, trying to make your brain keep up. So the islands move even though they don't move. He shrugs. It makes more sense at sea. Fringe, tidbit. Some navigators liken this system to riding the stars like a canoe, seeing themselves not as crossing an ocean, but as staying still while the world rearranged itself around them. It's part navigation, part philosophy, like understanding the universe by standing still and watching it dance. Historians still argue whether the ETAC method was consciously mathematical or primarily intuitive. Some researchers believe wayfinders developed complex internal models of distances, angles, and star movements, while others suggest the system was more experiential, learned through repetition, rhythm, and storytelling, rather than precise calculation. Probably it was both. You're handed a long stick and asked to trace your imagined journey. You mark a line of ETAC zones with your foot, counting off as if reciting a spell. First, the island slips past the star, then another, then another. You picture it happening, above a real ocean, not a patch of sand. Suddenly the system clicks. You're not navigating towards something. You're watching for when the past drops away behind the stars. It's strangely emotional. Navigating by what's behind you, not just what's ahead. Later, over taro cooked in a smoky fire pit, you learn that each star used in ETAC had a name, often poetic. The one who stands in the east, the mother of the crooked path, he who dances over the shallow reef. You recite, a few aloud, feeling the syllables roll over your tongue like pebbles in surf. Your guide tests you, of course. He points to the sky, now turning twilight blue, and asks, if we were sailing toward that star, and that island passed behind it, how many ETAC would we be into the journey? You flail a little. 3, he nods. 4, but close. You're catching the rhythm. A village elder joins you at the fire. He's quiet at first, sipping something from a carved cup. Then, with no introduction, he begins telling a story of his first journey as a navigator in training. He speaks of long nights, songs under the stars, and that moment, always a moment, when the island finally appeared after weeks of signs and waiting. He says nothing about GPS coordinates or paper charts, but you realize the journey he's describing is as accurate and deliberate as any modern voyage. It's just painted in a different language. There's a lull in the story. The fire crackles. Then your guide whispers, you see why this isn't just a method. It's a way of seeing, a way of remembering. You nod. You do see. You sit, together in silence, watching the stars bloom overhead. Your guide hums the star chant again. You join in, one star, one zone, one breath at a time. The next morning, you wake up with sand stuck to your cheek and a line from the star chant echoing, faintly in your head, the one who dances over the shallow reef. It's unclear whether you dreamed it or murmured it aloud in your sleep. Either way, it sticks with you like a lullaby. Today, your guide has a different twinkle in his eye. He gestures toward the canoe again, this time loaded with more palm bundles and coconuts than seems reasonable for a short trip. We'll go further, he says simply, just to where the ocean starts to forget the land. You don't entirely know what that means, but you pack your things. Coconut shell cup? Check. The fish-shaped amulet they gave you yesterday. Around your neck? Your sense of direction? Still debatable. Once again, you're paddling out across the lagoon and into open water, only now with a slightly better sense of what's going on. The ocean smells less like vacation and more like mystery, deeper, darker, calmer. This section is all about the invisible cues of the sea, things you can't quite see, but that the body notices. Swell patterns, water temperature, floating debris, and bird flight. This is the navigator's silent language, and it's far more sophisticated than you'd ever imagined. Mainstream fact: Pacific navigators often detect ocean swells coming from multiple directions, each generated by distant storms. These swells are long, low waves that move across the sea like invisible highways. Skilled navigators can read them by feel, how they strike the hull, how the boat shifts underfoot, even how water slaps against the sides. It's a full-body skill. Your guide points as he steadies the canoe. Feel that? Swell from the east. But this one here, he taps the wooden seat. This is from the south. You feel it cross under. You nod, unsure. But then your stomach tilts slightly, and you do feel it. A kind of ghostly wobble, like someone tugging a chair leg ever so slightly from the left. Fringe tidbit. Some navigators reportedly lay flat on their backs in the canoe to feel the subtle crossing of wave trains more clearly, allowing the spine itself to register directional changes. It's like sonar, but with your vertebrae. Lie down, your guide says, reading your mind. So you do. At first, you're mostly feeling your own heartbeat. Then, slowly, a rhythm emerges. A long push from one side. Then a slower tug from another. You're being rocked by signals sent from weather systems thousands of miles away. Historians still argue whether this technique was universally taught or instinctively acquired. Was it trained, like a muscle, or absorbed over years of exposure and repetition? Perhaps both. In some regions, children were encouraged to play in canoes from an early age just to begin learning the language of the hulls. As you glide farther from the island, your guide begins pointing out sea life, not just for fun, but as signs. A floating clump of leaves, a type of drifting jellyfish, a streak of paler water over darker depths. Each one means something. This means a reef nearby. That means fresh water mixing. This, he lifts a finger toward a bird circling above, means land. Not near, but not far. Birds, especially certain species like frigate birds or noddies, are often used as avian compass needles. Some fly out at dawn and return at dusk, indicating distance from land. Others, like terns, tend to stay within a specific radius. Following their patterns, outward and back, is another method of indirect mapping. You spot one of these birds now, skimming close to the water. Your guide follows it with his eyes. We're inside the 50-mile ring, he says. Still home. He doesn't mean your island. He means any island. Somewhere, just over the curved lip of the sea, is land. You try to see what he sees. A bird's wing angle. The foam pattern around the canoe. The tension in the air. It's like trying to listen for music in the grain of a wooden table. But he hears it. The swell shifts. The guide adjusts the sail slightly and sings something under his breath. The boat responds like it understands. You realize that part of the journey is always listening. He tells you a story as you glide, of an ancestor who once fell asleep on a voyage, drifted far off course, and woke only by the feel of a third swell pattern, one that whispered, "You're heading away from everything." That swell brought him home. No stars, no birds, just a ripple under the ribs. You float for a while with your hand in the water. It's cooler than before. Deep trench, your guide mutters. That means currents will change. He adjusts again. Nothing drastic, but you feel the balance shift. The boat becomes a fingertip on the ocean's pulse. You look around, water to the horizon in every direction. You should feel lost, but instead you feel held, like the ocean isn't trying to confuse you. It's just waiting for you to listen properly. You think of your phone back home, sitting in a drawer. You wonder what it would say if you tried to drop a GPS pin right now. Probably no signal. And somehow that feels perfect. You're deep into open ocean now. The island is no longer visible behind you. And the sky has taken on that high, endless quality that makes everything below feel like a secret. The sea stretches in every direction, like a vast blue sheet, freshly ironed by the sun. You're surprised by the stillness, not the lack of movement, but the sense that everything is where it's supposed to be. Today's lesson? Clouds. Yes, clouds. Because if the stars are your night map, and the swells are your compass beneath the boat, then the sky during the day gives its own set of quiet instructions. And here, where the only lines in the sky are drawn by nature, the navigators read the clouds like you might glance at highway signs. Mainstream fact: traditional Polynesian navigators used cloud formations as indicators of land and weather systems. Certain types of clouds form consistently over specific island types. For example, the flat-topped cumulus clouds, what some, call island hats, often sit above high volcanic islands due to rising warm air. Navigators at sea could spot these from dozens of miles away, even when the land beneath wasn't yet visible. Your guide points to a faint smudge near the horizon. That, he says, is not a cloud. That is a promise. You squint. To you, it looks like every other puff of white cotton in the sky, but you nod solemnly anyway. He laughs gently. Don't worry, you'll see it soon. Fringe tidbit. Some stories tell of cloud colors that change slightly due to the reflection of land below. Greenish undertones, they say, might hint at forested islands. Slight pinks? Possibly coral atolls. Navigators wouldn't rely on this alone, but for a trained eye, color subtleties whispered clues. Historians still argue whether these cloud-reading techniques were taught systematically or absorbed through decades of observational apprenticeship. Were there named types of land clouds, or did navigators simply develop a personal sense of what to trust? You look up again. There's a cluster of high clouds being slowly deformed by the upper winds. Storm brewing out west. Your guide murmurs, but not for us. You try to read what he sees, the vertical stretch of vapor, the way the base darkens. It's like he's reading a book with pages of mist, paragraphs of wind. Soon you begin to notice more, thin trailing edges, wisps that bend left instead of right, stacked layers. It's all data, just not the digital kind. The guide gives you a sort of quiz. He points to 3 clouds and asks, which would form above an atoll? Which one means a squall line? Which will vanish by midday? You get 1 out of 3. He grins like that's a win. Later, he recounts a voyage led entirely by skywatching. The crew had no stars due to a week of overcast skies, and the swell patterns grew confused near an undersea ridge. But the clouds, those were steady. The navigator trusted them, watching for the 3 crowns, a name given to a pattern that resembled stacked royal headwear. Days later, they made landfall exactly where they hoped. You ask him how many kinds of clouds he can name. He shrugs. Don't name them, just know them. You stare up again, and now it feels personal, like you've just been handed a puzzle made of vapor. A seabird cuts through the air above, heading straight for that promise on the horizon. The smudge is bigger now, still cloudy, but maybe. You reach into your pack and grab the small wooden pointer your guide gave you on day 1. You trace an imaginary line from your canoe to that distant mark. It feels silly, but it also feels like belief. You lean back and let the boat rock gently beneath you. The wind shifts, just slightly, and the guide adjusts the sail. He hums a different chant this time, one you haven't heard. It's lower, almost a murmur, like he's syncing with the rhythm of the sky instead of the sea. The canoe glides on. No motors, no compass, no doubt. Just clouds and confidence. And the slow reveal of something just over the edge of vision. You wake from a nap you didn't plan. The sea cradled you into it like a grandmother's lullaby. And when you open your eyes again, the light has shifted to that warm, syrupy gold that means the sun is considering its exit. And now, you see it. The smudge you stared at for hours is no longer just a cloud. It's land, actual land, low and distant, but unmistakable. A dark line rising from the sea's horizon like a secret that's grown tired of hiding. Your guide sees your wide eyes and gives a small nod. Told you, he says. Not smug, just sure. Today, the story is about land finding, how Polynesian navigators used a layered system of clues to zero in on small specks of Earth in a massive ocean, long before GPS, satellite imaging, or even written maps. Mainstream fact, navigators relied on an integrated reading of signs, stars at night, swells beneath, birds overhead, debris in the water, and clouds above, to locate land. When multiple cues lined up, they'd know they were getting close. Some could confidently aim for islands hundreds of miles away and miss by only a few kilometers. Think about that the next time Google Maps reroutes you because you took one wrong turn into a McDonald's parking lot. As you drift closer, the clues begin piling up. The swell becomes choppier, like the ocean is pushing back a little. That's from the island's underwater shelf interfering with the waves. The water color shifts, greener now, or is it just your imagination? Smell that? The guide says. You pause. Yes, a faint sweetness. Maybe guava. Maybe flowers. Definitely. Land. The scent of trees carried by salt wind. Navigators use this too, especially early in the morning when the wind pulled cool air off the forests. Fringe tidbit. Some traditions mention listening for land, not in the literal sense of hearing, but in the shift of how sound behaves. A distant island can subtly bounce or absorb wave echoes in a way that long-term seafarers internalized. The ocean's hush has different acoustics near land. One navigator called it the throat of the sea changing shape. Historians still argue whether certain Polynesian navigation feats were the result of genius individuals or broader cultural knowledge shared across centuries. Was there a core navigators guild maintaining techniques? Or did each island group evolve its own versions of wayfinding wisdom? The truth probably lies somewhere in between. A fluid network of ideas passed along wave by wave. You look at the land again. It's growing. You can almost see trees now, palm fronds catching the wind like gossiping hands. The shape of the coastline reveals itself. Low dunes, then a rise, then something glinting that might be a lagoon. Your guide begins to chant again. It's not a map song this time. It's reverent. You ask if it's a welcome. It's a request, he replies. We ask the island if we may arrive. You're quiet for a while. It feels good to ask permission. As you near the island, the details become richer. A line of birds escorts you for a stretch, like tiny, feathered border guards. Floating seed pods drift past. Your guide picks one up and smiles. These come from far, he says. But the sea remembers. You make landfall not with fanfare, but with hush. The canoe glides up onto a soft beach of crushed coral and shell. A few crabs scurry away like someone forgot to tell them guests were coming. The island feels old, like it knew you were coming before you did. You step onto shore and notice something peculiar. The sand is warmer than you expect, like it's held the day just for you. You don't unpack. Not yet. Your guide sits quietly, looking inland. You sit beside him, and for a while you both just breathe. That's the final lesson of landfinding. The journey doesn't end when you arrive. It continues quietly, in the way you look at the sky now, in the way you'll listen to waves back home, in the way you'll dream about stars that don't have names on your maps, but might have always been guiding you anyway. You spend your first night on the island wrapped in woven pandanus leaves, your hammock slung between two ancient trees that creak ever so slightly with the sea breeze. The waves murmur nearby, telling old stories to the sand, and in the treetops, birds rustle like gossiping villagers. Sleep comes easily. The canoe earned it. But morning brings new rhythms. Today, you follow your guide inland. Not far, just enough to shift your perspective. The sea becomes a sound behind you instead of a sight before you. The island's voice grows louder. This section is about orientation through memory. How once land is found, it is remembered. Not by coordinates, but by song, sensation, and subtle detail. Mainstream fact. In Polynesian culture, island geography was stored in memory as a series of environmental cues encoded into chants and stories. These oral maps described not only directions, but the feel of a place, how the wind shifted near certain coves, which trees bloomed first, which bird calls signaled a freshwater stream. Your guide stops before a tree shaped like it forgot which way was up. This one, he says, leans toward the dry season. You tilt your head. Sure enough, its lopsided crown faces a cluster of hills tinged gold with dust. Whether by observation or inheritance, your guide has absorbed the island's quirks like a language. Fringe tidbit. Some navigators would dig small test holes in the soil and taste the earth. Sweetness hinted at coconut roots. A metallic tang might mean iron-rich clay, possibly useful for tools or pottery. Others tested water temperature in shallow pools. learning to detect underground springs by feel alone. These micro-detections weren't superstition, they were strategy. Historians still argue whether these practices were systematically taught or passed down more intuitively. Did apprentice navigators undergo formal tests? Or was mastery judged only by success at sea? Some suggest a mix. Structured mentorships built atop years of slow, silent watching. You reach a slight rise. From here, you can see the shore again. Your canoe, a toothpick in the surf. The ocean, its familiar face waiting patiently. But your guide turns inland again. He leads you along a narrow path, edged with knee-high ferns and the occasional startled lizard. This is the wind corridor, he says. You feel it before he explains. An invisible line where the air moves faster, cooler. We remember places like this, he adds, so we know where to build, where to sleep, where not to. You think about your own home, whether your street has a wind corridor, whether you'd even notice if it did. Later, he stops at a clearing where several stones have been arranged in a pattern, concentric rings around a center mark. He doesn't explain it outright, just hums a low tune as he walks it. This helps us recall direction, he eventually says. North feels different when you move around it. You ask him if the island has a name. He tells you 3. There's the ceremonial name used in songs, poetic, full of moon references. There's the practical name used in wayfinding chants, a phrase that rhymes easily with the word for reef, da. And then there's the island's true name, which he whispers so softly you wonder if you imagined it. Names are also directions, he says. You sit for a while in the stone circle, watching the shadows rotate like the hands of a slow clock. The wind shifts again, a bird calls. Your guide hums the same tune, but now it sounds like a compass, quietly turning you. Even back on your feet, the island stays with you differently now. Every tree has a lean. Every breeze seems opinionated. Every silence holds a memory someone once sang into it. You start to feel the island the way he does, not as a shape on a map, but as a living archive. A place that teaches its direction not by telling, but by showing, softly, slowly, until it becomes part of how you move. Back at the shoreline, your canoe rests exactly where you left it, tilted slightly, like it's listening to the tide. You sit beside it and dip your feet in the shallows, toes brushing tiny fish that dart around like whispers. Your guide joins you, balancing a coconut with the top sliced clean off. He hands it to you without a word. It tastes like travel and sunlight. You both stare out at the horizon, as if daring it to surprise you again. Today's story drifts into the realm of canoe-building knowledge, the deeply skilled, often ritualistic process of crafting the vessels that made these incredible journeys possible. Because even the best navigator needs a worthy craft beneath their feet. Mainstream fact: Polynesian voyaging canoes, or waka, va'a, or wa'a, depending on the island group, were masterpieces of engineering designed for both speed and resilience. Typically double-hulled and lashed rather than nailed, they could carry dozens of people and provisions across thousands of miles of open ocean. Their flexible structure absorbed the shock of waves better than rigid hulls, reducing the risk of capsizing. Your guide leads you over to a canoe under construction, nestled in the shade. It's in its early stages, a long, scooped log resting on supports, with half its skin still rough with bark. A few older men sit nearby, carving deliberately, their blades shaped like bird beaks. The wood smells of spice and old storms. You watch in silence, fringe tidbit. Some builders chose trees based on dreams. If an elder dreamed of a tree speaking or bending toward the sea, it might be selected for the next great canoe. Others claimed birds nesting in the branches or lizards circling the trunk were omens, greenlit signs from the natural world. Rational? Maybe not. But in a culture that listens closely, nothing is just random. Historians still argue whether canoe building methods were strictly localized or if expert canoe makers traveled between islands, spreading innovations. Some archaeological finds show tool marks and joinery techniques that seem to blend styles from hundreds of miles apart, suggesting a fluid sharing of craft knowledge, like a woodworker's whisper passed between islands. Your guide crouches beside a length of fibre rope, senet, made from dried coconut husk. He explains how it's woven with a twist that resists saltwater unraveling. Nails rust, he says, but rope remembers how to hold. The canoe's skeleton, when finished, will be lashed entirely with this material, thousands of tiny cords tightening with tension. When the waves hit, the whole vessel will flex, not crack. You run a hand over the half-carved prow. It feels alive. There's a sort of muscularity to it, like a dolphin mid-leap, paused only for a moment. Later, you're invited to help with a non-essential task, polishing a small section of hull with oil made from kukui nuts. The motion is circular, gentle, repetitive, sleepy almost. You fall into a rhythm and forget to speak. Your guide says, that's part of it too. Your body learns the canoe before your mind does. You think about that, about how the navigator learns the ocean with their skin and muscles, how builders learn the canoe the same way. He gestures to a completed craft nearby. That one knows where it's going already, he says. We just give it the reason. The sun dips lower, the tide begins to rise again. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the canoe's curve, just a ripple, a blur, but unmistakably present. As you walk away, a boy runs past, carrying a tiny model canoe carved from driftwood. He makes whooshing sounds and points it toward the sea. You smile. That's how it starts. A dream, a tree, a piece of rope that won't forget. The sky is a little pink today, not dramatic, just enough to soften the edges of clouds, as if someone gently smeared watercolor across the horizon. You stretch your arms and feel your muscles answer slowly, still echoing yesterday's canoe polishing. There's a pleasant soreness, like a souvenir from effort. Your guide is already at the shore, humming something tuneless. Today you notice he's not looking at the sea, he's looking at the sky. That can only mean one thing. Today's lesson, cloud reading, the art of interpreting weather, distance, and land presence through the ever-shifting language of clouds. Mainstream fact, in Polynesian wayfinding, cloud formations serve as important cues. Navigators know that low stationary clouds often hover over islands due to moisture rising from vegetation or heat radiating from the landmass. These island clouds can appear well before the island itself is visible. Their shape, color, and movement all offer hints if you know how to listen. Your guide gestures upward. See that one? It's a land cloud. It looks like an ordinary cumulus to you, fluffy, bright. But then again, you also once thought canned pasta counted as a meal. So who are you to judge? He explains how certain clouds sit lower in the sky when over land because of how heat interacts with moisture-laden air. Some even reflect lagoon colors from below, turning faintly greenish or blue on their undersides. A mirror that forgets to lie, he calls it. Fringe tidbit. In some regions, navigators believe specific birdsong patterns change when clouds signal rain or land. There's even a phrase in one oral tradition translating to, "When the tern sings flat, the island is near." Whether this holds meteorological water or not, it speaks to how deeply connected every sound, shape, and shadow is to the art of knowing direction. Historians still argue whether these interpretations of cloud behavior were standardized across the Polynesian world or deeply local. Some island groups used elaborate cloud taxonomies, others focused more on swell reading. One researcher noted that a navigator from one archipelago dismissed another system entirely, calling it useful only if you enjoy being lost politely. You squint again. The cloud your guide pointed to hasn't moved. Everything else in the sky drifts, reforms, dissolves, but that one just sits there, like it has nowhere better to be. You feel something familiar stir in your chest. Recognition. You're learning the difference between clouds that travel and clouds that wait, between watchers and wanderers. He tells you that clouds are like old people at a village feast. Some talk, some sit, Some bring news. Some just want to be left alone. You both laugh at that. The wind carries the sound upward. Later, as you gather water from a stream inland, you notice a reflection. Clouds above mirrored in the surface. The forest canopy dapples the image, but one in particular stands clear. The same unmoving cloud. It's watching you now too. Back by the canoe, your guide is quiet for a while. Then he says something unexpected. Sometimes we navigate not to find new places, but to remember old ones. You wonder if he means islands, or something deeper. Memories you never knew you had. Maybe a cloud hovering over a childhood you never lived, but that somehow lives in you anyway. The day closes with clouds like layered quilts, soft, overlapping, stitched together by wind. As the stars begin to press through the fading blue, your guide gives a final glance at the western horizon. Tomorrow, he says, we sail again. You nod. Clouds above, water below, a canoe ready, and now, maybe, the beginning of a map that lives in you. Morning arrives with the hush of anticipation. Even the birds seem quieter today, as if they know you're preparing to push off. Once more, you eat something simple. Grilled breadfruit and a sliver of smoked fish. Then help your guide stow supplies in the canoe. Today's focus is on sound. Not music exactly, though there's a rhythm to it. You'll be learning how Polynesian navigators use the world's subtle symphony, waves, wind, birds, even silence itself, as tools for wayfinding. Mainstream fact: one of the lesser-known aspects of Polynesian navigation is auditory perception. Navigators would listen closely to the voice of the sea, the way it hissed against the hull, the tempo of distant breakers, the pitch of the wind. The oceans spoke in frequencies and textures, and the best wayfinders knew how to interpret them. As you settle into the canoe, your guide says very little. Instead, he tilts his head. You follow suit, and slowly your hearing sharpens. First, the obvious, the slap of waves against the sides of the vessel, the faint creak of the lashings between the hulls. Then, more detail, the low growl of a distant reef, too far to see, but close enough to warn. The occasional chirp of a seabird circling overhead. And then silence, an unusually still patch of water. Your guide nods. We call this the ocean's breath in, he says. It's what happens before it tells you something. Fringe tidbit. Some navigators claimed they could detect approaching islands by the echo of waves bouncing off unseen landmasses. This phenomenon, called wave reverberation, creates subtle interference patterns. A trained ear might notice a faint doubling or dampening in the swell rhythm, a kind of auditory mirage. Historians still argue whether this was reliable, science or sailor's myth. Some say it's unlikely the human ear could detect such fine acoustic differences over open water. Others counter that with decades of immersion, the brain adapts, sharpening what would normally be imperceptible. One study compared seasoned Polynesian sailors to trained musicians, and found the sailors could outperform them in tests of rhythmic accuracy when mimicking wave patterns. Your guide hands you a small gourd filled with pebbles. Old trick, he says, shaking it lightly. You hear better when you compare. He rattles the gourd next to your ear, while the canoe rocks gently. The consistent rhythm inside helps. You notice the slight irregularities outside. You begin to hear the sea in layers, like a symphony with dozens of instruments. The boom of a distant wave on stone. The slosh of water under your seat. The whisper of wind curling around your ear. A sharp pop from something unseen beneath the surface. Maybe a fish, maybe the ocean cracking its knuckles. Then comes birdsong. At first it blends with everything else, but your guide raises a finger. 1, 2, 3 repeated calls. A tern, he says. They don't sing like that unless land's within flying distance. He gestures toward the eastern horizon, where no land is visible yet. We'll see it in the morning. You squint. Nothing. but your ears are sure. He smiles at your uncertainty. We used to teach children this way, he says. Blindfolded, in a canoe. Let them listen until they heard where they were. You imagine that, bobbing gently in darkness, all sensation reduced to movement and sound. It sounds like a dream, or maybe a lullaby with no words. As the sun rises higher, the breeze picks up and changes pitch. You note how it whistles differently through the sail lines. That's the southerly, your guide mutters. She's in a bad mood today. The humour isn't lost on you, naming winds like old aunts with shifting temperaments. A pod of dolphins appears briefly off the starboard side, leaping through the surf like they've got somewhere very fun to be. You point. Your guide nods. They're laughing at us, he says. They know we're still learning. You laugh too, but a quiet one. The kind you make when you realise you're not in control, and that's somehow fine. By sunset, your ears are tired, but sharper than ever. You notice the wind drop half a tone. You hear the distant call of a frigate bird, circling like a lighthouse in the sky. And just before dark, your guide stops paddling. You listen. It's faint, but it's there. A low, constant sound. Not water, not wind, not bird. Waves breaking on sand, he says. Land. Still nothing in sight. But somehow, you believe him, because you heard it first. The island reveals itself at dawn, not with trumpets or drama, but the way a candle slowly brightens a dark room. First a blur on the horizon, then a shape, then detail. Green ridges, red cliffs, black volcanic, stone cradling a quiet lagoon. It's been there all along, just waiting for your senses to catch up. You and your guide don't speak at first. There's a quiet reverence between you, like you're intruding on something holy. And maybe you are. The island doesn't wave hello. It simply exists, unconcerned with being found. As your canoe glides closer, today's focus comes into view. Landfall rituals, those quiet, often sacred moments that marked a navigator's arrival after weeks at sea. Because reaching land isn't just a success, it's a conversation with the spirits of the place. Mainstream fact. In many Polynesian cultures, making landfall was a spiritual act, not just a navigational achievement. Upon sighting land, crews might offer chants, gifts, or symbolic gestures to honor the ancestors, ocean spirits, or gods believed to protect travelers. Some traditions involved blowing a conch shell to announce peaceful arrival. Others placed a carved stick or flower lay in the water as a thank you to the sea. Your guide stands and lifts a small bundle from beneath the bow, a braid of pandanus leaves, woven tight. He uncoils it carefully, revealing a few smooth stones, a dried flower, and a strip of tapa cloth. Each item has a meaning, he says. One to say thank you, one to ask permission, one to remember the ones who didn't make it. He drops the bundle into the sea where it floats for a moment before sinking slowly, spiraling like a soft-spoken wish. Fringe tidbit. In some oral accounts, navigators believed certain islands would reject you if your intention was wrong. Currents would shift, clouds would mask visibility, and birds would turn back. Some interpreted multiple failed landfalls as a sign to reevaluate one's spiritual readiness rather than a navigational error. Historians still argue whether these rituals were primarily religious acts or coded navigational practices disguised as spirituality. Some anthropologists suggest that by building ritual into the routine of sailing, navigators created psychological safeguards, tools for managing anxiety, reinforcing memory, or building group cohesion after long and stressful voyages. You reach the island by midday. The canoe glides into a narrow inlet where the water turns still and glassy. Palm trees lean in to greet you like sleepy elders. Your guide steps out first, places his hand on a rock, and murmurs something. Then he motions for you to do the same. The stone is warm, textured. It smells faintly of sea salt and centuries. You copy his movement and speak nothing at all. A welcome party meets you farther up the beach. Only a few people, barefooted and smiling. No trumpets here either. Just nods, a shared drink, a soft cloth laid over your shoulders. Someone hands you a lei, flowers strung together like a necklace of sunrises. You try not to sneeze. You spend the afternoon helping unload the canoe. It feels ceremonial, even if it's just coconuts and fish hooks. You learn that nothing is truly just anything on a voyage like this. Every item packed had weight, meaning risk. Even a handful of salt was a choice. By evening, you're sitting beneath a breadfruit tree with a bowl of warm food you can't name, but instantly love. Someone plays a wooden flute nearby. Its song meandering, gentle, like the wind trying to remember something. Your guide raises his bowl toward you. "We made it," he says simply. And though your body is tired, your skin sun-browned, your mind somewhere between wakefulness and dreaming, you raise yours too. To land, to journeys that end gently, to the quiet power of arrival. You wake on land, but your body still thinks it's at sea. The earth feels like it's swaying, just slightly, like a bed someone nudges with a toe. Your dreams were filled with birds and wave patterns, and for a few moments, you're not quite sure where you are. A rooster settles that for you. He's loud, enthusiastic, and far too early. You sit up in a hut made of woven palm fronds. You're bedding a layered mat of soft tapa cloth and woven pandanus. It smells faintly of smoke and sea air, like a bonfire that somehow went swimming. Outside, the island is stretching awake. There's laughter in the distance, the clatter of cooking pots, a dog barking lazily. Today, you'll be learning about settlement scouting. How early Polynesian navigators evaluated new islands not just as places to visit, but as potential homes. Mainstream fact: upon arriving at a new island, explorers assessed it systematically. They looked for fresh water, fertile soil, safe harbors, and building materials like timber and stone. They also studied wind patterns and star paths, ensuring the island could be re-navigated in case they returned or needed to leave quickly. Your guide takes you inland, walking barefoot through undergrowth so green it almost hums. You don't pick a place just because it's pretty, he says, ducking under a low branch. You pick it because it lets you live. He pauses at a stream and cups water to his lips. Then he shrugs. Not bad. Could boil it. You drink some too. It tastes like morning. Fringe tidbit. Some island legends suggest that scouts once released pigs or chickens on shore first to test if the place was safe. If the animals thrived, the people followed. If not, well, at least they learned without losing a cousin. Historians still argue whether early settlement decisions were purely practical or layered with cosmological meaning. Some scholars insist that alignments with specific stars or ancestral myths played as large a role as soil or shade. There are oral traditions where an island was only deemed habitable if it echoed a pattern seen in a constellation, or if a sacred bird landed first. You follow a ridge path that reveals the full curve of the island. Cliffs plunging to turquoise water, reef rings like necklaces scattered by giants, inland valleys that fold into themselves with the softness of old fabric. You can almost hear the ancestors debating. Too windy here, too rocky there. Ooh, but look at that lagoon. Your guide gestures to a rocky outcrop. We built signal fires here, he says, to tell the next canoe whether to come or turn. Back. You ask what the signal was. He grins. If it's smoking, good. If it's on fire, really good. He's joking, but maybe only a little. Later, you help dig sweet potatoes from a trial garden, something the settlers would have done early on. You learn that these early voyages often carried saplings, seeds, even cuttings of favorite plants across vast distances, tucked into damp husks or gourds. A traveling garden, really. Bananas, taro, sugarcane, all waiting to find new soil. You hold a sprouting breadfruit seedling. It's been on its own little odyssey. You pat the soil around it gently. Welcome home, you whisper. Evening settles with the golden hush of long shadows. The The village children play a game that involves chasing each other with sticks and dramatic collapses, while elders sit in a circle, murmuring stories. You learn one more thing. Early settlers often named features of a new island after parts of their canoe journey. The place where the wind changed, the cove of the shy star, the sleeping rock. And in this way, the memory of the sea stayed rooted in the land. You smile at that, naming places after what it took to find them. Tonight, you sleep on earth, but your dreams still float. And now, when the land sways slightly beneath you, you know it's not your imagination, it's just your soul still paddling. The days blur gently. Island life has its own tempo, slow, circular, and perfectly content to leave you behind if you try to rush it. Your muscles are less sore now. Your skin has found its equilibrium between sun-kissed and crispy. And you've developed the peculiar ability to wake at dawn without needing a rooster. Though, of course, the rooster still insists. Today, your guide says, you'll learn about inter-island memory, how navigators remembered the routes between dozens, sometimes hundreds of islands, across thousands of miles of open ocean. Mainstream fact. Polynesian voyaging required more than just navigating a single journey. Routes were memorized as chains of references, often anchored to stars, ocean swells, bird patterns, or cloud formations. These mental maps were sometimes sung or chanted, oral archives that guided canoes for generations. You walk with your guide to a quiet cove where the waves lap rhythmically against black volcanic stone. He picks up a smooth stick and begins to draw lines in the sand. You want to remember an island chain, he asks. Start with what you feel. He draws a line, slightly curved, then dots along it. This one you feel in your belly because the swell comes sideways, he says. This one tastes salty, more sea spray. He adds a jagged loop. And this one, you always dream of birds the night before. You look at him. Dream of birds. He shrugs. Worked for me. Fringe tidbit. Some master navigators reportedly used story maps to memorize routes. An island might be the place where the ocean scolds you, followed by the place where the stars argue. The journey became a narrative, where every direction, every change in wind or current became a plot twist. Historians still argue how these memory systems compare to Western cartography. Some suggest Polynesian oral mapping was more dynamic, capable of adapting in real time. Others believe some navigators may have used proto-visual maps, like the Marshallese stick charts, but those were likely teaching aids, not seafaring tools. Most voyagers carried only what fit in their heads. Your guide points to the horizon and recites a string of island names, some real, some legendary. He chants them rhythmically, and you realize the beat mimics the paddling stroke. You try to copy it and trip over the syllables. Don't worry, he says. You'd remember better in a canoe. Everything makes more sense when you're sore. He hands you a short staff, plain wood, smooth as drift-polished bone. Some of us made walking sticks carved with island clues, he says. Not to read, just to feel. You run your hand over it while you walk, and your fingers remember the journey even if your mouth forgets. You close your eyes and trace the stick. A ridge here, a dent there. You can almost imagine, here's where the wind shifts, here's where the dolphins followed, here's where the moonlight looked like fire on the water. In the late afternoon, you join a group of elders. They sit in a wide circle on woven mats, chanting a voyage you don't know. But the cadence pulls you in. One elder beats a slow rhythm on a hollowed log, and a child dances small, precise steps around the circle, mimicking the stars with each movement. You begin to understand. This isn't just memory, it's inheritance. The stories carry roots, the dances carry distances, the chants carry warnings, tides, gratitude, and somewhere inside your own head, a map is starting to sketch itself. Not one of lines and coordinates, but of feelings and echoes. A journey where each swell is a comma, each bird is a breath, each island a a whispered name you'll never forget. Even if you only heard it once, you've started to notice something. It creeps in quietly, like dew, like memory, like starlight. You're not thinking in hours anymore. You're thinking in tides, in wind shifts, in coconut shadows that stretch across the sand and say, "It's time to rest now." The island has loosened your grip on clocks and sharpened your sense of flow. Today, you learn about seasonal voyaging, why early Polynesian navigators didn't just sail when they felt like it, but waited for the right. Rhythms of sea, sky, and community, mainstream fact. Traditional Pacific voyaging was deeply attuned to seasonal cycles. The best time to sail was often during the dry season, when trade winds were steady and skies clearer for celestial navigation. For many regions, this was roughly between April and October. Certain stars only rose during specific months, acting as celestial green lights that said, "Now is the time." Your guide greets you this morning with a smile and a piece of fruit you don't recognize. "Good for travel season," he says, "keeps you regular." You're not sure if he means digestion or boat schedules, possibly both. You hike together to a rocky lookout where you can see the whole stretch of ocean. He points with his walking stick. "See the clouds over there?" he asks. "Too high, still dry season." You squint and pretend to understand. He chuckles. You'll get it. Or you'll just end up wet a lot. Fringe tidbit. Some communities tracked sailing seasons, not by calendar dates, but by animal behavior. For example, the migration of certain birds or the blooming of specific coastal flowers might signal the start or end of safe travel windows. There are legends of elders interpreting whale songs, their direction and frequency, as navigational signs. Historians still argue whether these animal-based signs were reliable indicators or post hoc lore. Some say they reflect deep environmental literacy, while others see them as poetic embellishments tacked onto more practical knowledge. But in oral cultures, poetry and practicality often blurred beautifully. Back in the village, you're shown a ceremonial calendar, not a calendar in the Western sense, but a seasonal wheel, marked with carved images, waves, moons, fish, birds. Each spoke of the wheel represents a lunar phase, a type of wind, or a change in sea current. Your guide taps the wheel. "This moon," he says, "too stormy. Canoes stay home. Everyone makes babies and fish hooks." You raise an eyebrow. "That's an interesting combination." He shrugs, keeps the island going. Later, a group of elders invites you to watch a mock voyage ceremony. Young voyagers circle a canoe, singing a chant that names the season, the ancestors, and the stars to follow. The canoe is lifted, gently, reverently, then set back down. It's not about going anywhere today. It's about remembering how and when you go. The chant's rhythm mimics the swell pattern of a calm sea. You can almost feel your body respond, your breath matching the imagined waves, your muscles relaxing into the story. You think of home, wherever that is now. Your modern calendar, your digital alerts, your endless to-do lists. You never once consulted the stars before booking a flight. But here, you understand. You don't fight the seasons. You listen. You don't push the wind. You wait for it. You don't own the journey. You're invited along for the ride. As dusk falls, the villagers light a slow fire and pass around roasted breadfruit and fish wrapped in banana leaves. You eat slowly. You've learned that rushing a meal here is like yelling at a wave, pointless and a little rude. Your guide offers you a final bite and says, "Next full moon the wind shifts. You'll feel it." You believe him. You've started to feel a lot of things you used to ignore. You wake before the rooster. That's a victory. The air is velvet with pre-dawn stillness, and for a few minutes, the world belongs only to the sound of distant waves and one very confused gecko chirping like it's late for something. Today, your guide announces, you'll be visiting the canoe house. You pause, thinking maybe he means a place where they store the canoes, like a garage. He gives you a look that suggests he's mildly disappointed in your imagination. The canoe house isn't just a storage shed. It's a sacred space, a cathedral made of timber and lashings and open air, an architecture of reverence. Mainstream. Fact. Canoe houses, or hailwa in Hawaiian and other Polynesian terms elsewhere, were central structures in many island societies. Not only were they used for building and storing voyaging canoes, but they also served as places of instruction, ritual, and intergenerational storytelling. Your guide brings you to one such structure. Its soaring roof, supported by beams carved, with simple patterns, waves, birds, stars. The air inside smells of sandalwood, salt, and sap. The floor is packed dirt, cool and smooth beneath your feet. A partially built canoe rests like a sleeping giant in the center. Everything in here, your guide says, has memory, fringe tidbit. In some traditions, the canoe was believed to have a spirit, a kind of consciousness. Before felling the tree for the hull, builders might perform a ritual asking permission from the forest. The first lashings would be blessed. Some would even whisper names to the canoe as they shaped it, speaking gently to coax the soul awake. Historians still argue how literal this spiritual belief was. Some suggest it was metaphorical, honoring the interconnection of nature and craft. Others believe builders genuinely saw the canoe as a living being, deserving of ceremony, gratitude, and even mourning if lost at sea. Your guide leads you around the canoe. This one? He says. She hasn't been named yet. We wait until the first time she touches the ocean. Then we listen. You touch the side of the canoe. The wood is warm from the morning light and smooth like the worn handle of a tool passed through generations. It's shaped from a single trunk with ribs carefully measured and symmetrical, yet not sterile. It feels alive. He hands you a small adze, stone blade, wooden handle, tied with sennet rope. Want to try? He asks. You kneel, make a tentative cut. The tool glides better than you expect. Not easy exactly, but intuitive. Like it's helping you find the grain, not fighting you. The canoe builders nearby nod politely at your effort. One corrects your grip with a silent gesture. You try again. Better. The morning unfolds with a quiet rhythm. Carve, sand, tie, hum. Someone sings a low chant in the background. Not performance, just presence. You realize this place isn't about finishing a boat. It's about crafting connection. Midday, they pause for coconut water and stories. One of the elders tells a tale of a canoe that refused to float until its builder confessed a lie. Everyone chuckles, but your guide leans in. Some lies are heavier than stone, he says. You suspect he means that more than metaphorically. As the sun angles low, your guide shows you the canoe's steering paddle, a massive blade carved, with markings like water trails. He explains how its weight shifts balance, how a slight tilt can alter a journey's course. It's like steering your thoughts, he says. Don't pull too hard. Let the ocean do some of the work. You stay late in the canoe house. The shadows stretch long like fingers across the floor. Someone lights a small lamp in a corner, and its glow bounces off the hull's curved side, making the canoe look like it's already in motion. You sit beside it, quietly. This isn't a workshop. It's a memory chamber, a cradle for stories, not yet told. Evening cool settles over the island, like a shawl pulled gently across your shoulders. Tonight is not for carving or chanting or cloud watching. Tonight is for canoe launching. You're ushered toward the beach, where villagers have gathered near the waterline. Children run barefoot across the sand, laughing as they chase each other between woven mats. Elders sit in a semicircle, their eyes on the horizon, not because something's arriving, but because something is about to be released. A canoe, days away from completion when you first saw it, now gleams under layers of coconut oil and care. Every rope is tight, every timber hummed over, every mark along its hull chosen with intention. It's not large, but it looks ready. Mainstream fact. The launching of a voyaging canoe was not simply a boat hitting water. It was a ritual event involving offerings, chants, and communal celebration. In many cultures, the moment a canoe first touched the sea was seen as its birth. and its name would often be revealed during or after that moment. You sit beside your guide, who hands you a small flower lei. For her, he says simply. There's a chant rising from the women seated by the drums. It's not boisterous, more like a lullaby sung to the ocean, gentle, protective, the kind of sound that might coax even a nervous boat to believe it could float. Fringe tidbit, in some Pacific cultures, specific fish were released alongside new canoes as symbolic companions or scouts. It was believed these fish would carry news of the canoe's spirit to the wider ocean. In at least one island tradition, a carved decoy fish was lashed to the bow as a charm to attract safe currents. Historians still argue about whether these practices were widely shared or isolated to certain archipelagos. Some say they began as practical rituals, testing tides or timing launches with fish migrations, but were later embroidered with spiritual meaning. Others argue it's always been both. You're invited to help carry the canoe, just one corner, symbolic support. It takes dozens of hands, but the group moves as one. The hull bobs with each step, like it's already floating. When the first ripple touches its side, the chanting slows, and then she floats. Not heavily, not hesitantly, just smoothly, like she's returning to something she's never left. Your guide steps into the shallows, touches the prow, and whispers a name. You don't catch it, but he doesn't repeat it. It wasn't for you anyway. Someone beats a conch shell. It echoes across the bay, bouncing off rocks and salt and thyme. A small group paddles the canoe out a short distance, just far enough for the ocean to nudge it, try it on. Then they loop back. One elder laughs. "She listens!" he shouts, grinning. The mood shifts. Now the drums get louder, the food appears, and a coconut starts getting passed around with suspicious frequency. You wander to the edge of the celebration and sit near the dark water. The stars have come out in full ceremony. You can name a few now. They feel like neighbors. A little boy sits beside you, legs swinging off a rock. "She's going far?" he asks. You shrug. "Eventually," he thinks. "I think she'll find a place no one remembers yet." You nod. That sounds about right. A warm wind tousles your hair. You realize you've begun to feel protective of that canoe, like you want to send it with a sweater and a snack. But of course, she knows more than you do. She's been carved from story, sung into shape, given a name at the edge of the sea. She doesn't need you to worry. She's already on her way. The early morning mist curls like smoke above the beach, and you find yourself drawn once again to the water's edge. The canoe you helped launch yesterday rests gently in the lagoon, bobbing softly in rhythm with the waves. Today, you're about to learn how the Navigators used ocean swells as their secret map. Mainstream fact: Polynesian navigators mastered the art of reading swell patterns, long rolling waves that travel across entire ocean basins, often undisturbed by local winds. By recognizing the direction, size, and rhythm of these swells, they could determine their orientation at sea even when skies were overcast. Your guide hands you a palm leaf fan and gestures toward the horizon. "Feel it?" he asks. You wave, the fan absent-mindedly, trying to catch the faint breeze and the swell beneath it. The ocean is telling us a story. If you listen, you won't get lost. Fringe tidbit. Some traditions say that experienced navigators could detect subtle echo swells, secondary waves bouncing off islands miles away, almost like ocean whispers revealing hidden shores. Modern scientists have debated whether such fine swell readings are physically possible or part of an intuitive art passed down in generations. Historians still argue how widespread this practice was and whether it could reliably replace star navigation on cloudy nights. What is certain is that it required intense training and a finely tuned relationship with the sea. You close your eyes and try to tune in. The swells don't look like anything special at first, just gentle rises and falls. But your guide points out how some waves come in from one direction, while others ripple diagonally. "The ocean has layers," he says, like an old story with many voices. You imagine the canoe cutting through these layered waves, its hull aligned just right, so it rides smoothly, conserving energy. You think about how, in the vast Pacific, these swells could be the navigator's best friend and worst enemy, an invisible highway or a trap. Your guide then shows you a simple wooden device, almost like a miniature raft with little sticks. It's a modern teaching tool for swell patterns, letting students track directions and timing visually. He laughs as you try to balance it on your finger. Even the best started clumsy. As you practice, he tells you about a famous navigator who once lost his way because he misread a swell after a storm. That navigator didn't panic. He waited patiently, trusting the ocean would realign itself. And it did. You realize that the ocean is not just a challenge, but a living companion. A teacher with moods, whispers, and occasional grumbles. The sun climbs higher, and the breeze picks up, stirring the palms overhead. You lie back on the warm sand, eyes tracing the clouds and waves. For once, you feel less like a tourist and more like a student of the sea. Maybe someday you'll forget how to use a GPS, but remember how to listen. Maybe that's what it means to truly navigate. Your feet sink slightly into the warm sand as you follow your guide inland, away from the lagoon and the salt-kissed wind. You've learned about stars, he says, about swells. Now let's talk about things you can't see. You raise an eyebrow. Like ghosts. He grins. Worse, currents. Mainstream fact. Ocean currents, those vast, consistent rivers flowing within the sea, were well known to Polynesian navigators. Though invisible, these currents could affect voyages dramatically, either helping push a canoe along or dragging it hundreds of miles off course. Navigators learn to read them by watching drift patterns, floating debris, seaweed, and even the behavior of fish. He brings you to a small shack near a tidal inlet. Inside, there's a tangle of palm rope, wooden models, dried fish bones, and something that looks suspiciously like a sea turtle skull. He picks up a stick and starts drawing in the sand. This, he says, sketching a swirl, is a gyre, a big, lazy circle in the sea. You lean closer. He draws arrows showing how water moves across entire oceans, westward, northward, then curving east again. Fringe tidbit. In some traditions, navigators believed specific species of birds or jellyfish would only appear in certain current zones. These creatures served as biological markers of underwater motion. A sudden sighting of a moon jelly. It might mean you've slipped into a different current entirely. Historians still argue whether this kind of observation was widespread practice, or more anecdotal. A few remarkable individuals with heightened awareness passed down as legends. Either way, it's clear that many islanders didn't need a thermometer or satellite image to understand the sea was moving underneath them. Back at the shoreline, your guide gives you a coconut husk and sets it in the shallows. Now we wait, he says. You expect it to bob in place, but slowly, almost sneakily, it starts to drift sideways. That's a literal current, he explains. Small, but it adds up. If you're not watching, it'll take you 100 miles off course before you realize you're late for dinner. He tells you about an early voyager who supposedly used drift nets of feathers to test current speeds. As unlikely as it sounds, you can't help picturing someone crouched at the side of their canoe, releasing bright red feathers and noting which way they disappear. You look out across the water. It seems calm, unhurried. But now you know, beneath that calm is a force moving, constantly, quietly, shaping the course of entire journeys. As the tide begins to rise, you dip your fingers in the shallows and close your eyes. You can feel it now, just the faintest pull, like the sea tugging at your sleeve, asking you to follow. Your guide claps you on the shoulder. You've got the hang of it, he says. Now you just need 30 years of practice. You sigh. So I can graduate. He laughs. So you don't get lost forever. You both sit for a moment longer, watching another husk drift gently down the coast. It's peaceful, but it's also direction. The kind of information only a patient person would notice. And now maybe you're starting to be one of those people. You wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of low singing. Not quite a Song, not quite a chant, just a steady rhythmic hum, like someone stirring sugar into a warm cup of tea. Curious, you follow the sound to the canoe shed. Inside, by the glow of a single hanging oil lamp, a group of elders sits cross-legged on woven mats. They're speaking slowly, each taking turns, their voices dipping and rising like small boats over calm waters. Tonight's lesson: oral navigation lore. Mainstream fact: in Polynesian societies, knowledge of navigation wasn't stored in books or maps. It lived in oral traditions, often encoded as chants, songs, or poetic riddles. These memory aids preserved complex instructions about stars, swells, islands, and currents, like auditory GPS instructions passed down through generations. You're invited to sit. One elder, with hair the color of salt spray and eyes that barely blink, begins to recite what sounds like a lullaby. But soon, you realize it's a map, each line referring to a direction, each word cueing a shift in heading. Fringe tidbit. Some chants were structured around nonsense syllables or sounds that helped navigators pace their recitation with the movement of their canoe. These didn't have literal meanings, but acted as rhythm anchors, oral metronomes for memory and speed control. Historians still argue whether these chants were universal across the Pacific or more localized, changing with dialects, traditions, and even personal styles. Some researchers believe each master navigator developed a unique version, tailored to their specific voyages and ancestral lines. You try repeating a few lines. It feels a bit like learning choreography in the dark. You have no visual cues, just a melody of instructions. The elder smiles patiently. You won't understand it all. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the sea will understand if you sing it right. Another elder interjects with a half-whispered joke about forgetting a B line and ending up 2 islands over. The group chuckles. You realize that much of this lore isn't just practical. It's also a living memory, filled with moments of triumph, error, and everything in between. Stories of storms braved, landfalls misjudged, and sometimes even love letters smuggled in coconuts. One of the younger participants adds percussion with a pair of shells, mimicking the slap of waves against the hull. The room begins to sway, not literally, but emotionally, as the chant crescendos. You find yourself humming along, not because you understand it, but because it feels familiar, like a song you once knew in a dream. And then, just as the rhythm settles, they stop. Always leave the last verse unfinished, the eldest one says. It's for the next voyager to finish. You step outside into the breeze. The stars above are the same ones they were singing about. You still don't know all their names, but you're starting to hear their voices. And maybe, just maybe, that's the first step to remembering. You wake just before dawn, again. The ocean breathes steadily outside your sleeping hut, each wave brushing the shore like a broom sweeping a dusty memory away. You stretch and step barefoot into the hushed blue light. Today, you're going to learn about something both grand and peculiar: voyaging dreams. Mainstream fact: among many Polynesian cultures, dreams were taken seriously, especially for navigators. Dreams were believed to offer spiritual guidance or even direct instructions from ancestors. A voyage might be altered, delayed, or rerouted entirely if a master navigator received an important message in sleep. It wasn't superstition. It was another form of sensory input, part of a larger system of awareness. You walk down to the shoreline where your guide is already waiting, sipping from a half coconut of cool water. He motions for you to sit beside him. "I dreamt of a whale last night," he says without looking at you. Not swimming, not alive. A bone whale, white as driftwood. That means rain, 3 days. You glance up at the perfectly clear sky, skeptical. But the longer you look, the more you notice. A slight humidity, a faint haze forming at the horizon's edge. Fringe tidbit: some navigators were known to sleep intentionally on dreamstones, special coral or lava rocks believed to heighten dream clarity. A few elders swore by placing sea salt under their pillows to invite ocean spirits. And there are even stories, whispered around evening fires, of navigators dreaming of an island's exact silhouette days before landfall. Historians still argue over how much of this was symbolic storytelling and how much was serious decision-making protocol. But regardless, dreams were respected. They didn't override logic, but they added a layer, a kind of mental weather vane, turning gently toward deeper intuition. Your guide explains that voyaging was never just about sails and steering. It was about entering into alignment with the world, land, sea, sky, and self. Dreams were like messages sent ahead of your canoe, scouting the waters before you ever lifted a paddle. You're ushered into a quiet clearing behind the village, a place reserved for what your guide calls navigational meditation. The floor is packed sand, shaded by tall breadfruit trees. In the center, someone has carved a canoe shape into the earth. You lie down in it, awkwardly at first, then more naturally. The shape cradles your back. The trees hum above. Someone begins to chant softly. No one's expecting you to fall asleep, but they do want you to listen inside this time. You're asked to picture the voyage, not in broad terms, but in real sensory detail. How the salt stings your eyes, how your arms ache from paddling, how the stars shift above you like dancers slowly rotating in the heavens. You imagine all of it. And then, you feel a new element, a kind of pull, not from the tide or a current, but from something ahead, something you don't see yet. You're snapped out of the trance by the soft tapping of a stick on a drum. Time to get up. Later, your guide tells you the story of a man named Mau Piailug, one of the last master navigators of Micronesia. Mau reportedly dreamed of a voyage long before he ever made it. He described the exact feeling of wind on his cheek and the smell of the island they would reach. Years later, when he guided the Polynesian voyaging canoe Hokulea across thousands of miles without instruments, he recognized those sensations again. Coincidence? Perhaps. But out here, coincidence is treated like a friend, maybe a mischievous one, but still welcome at the table. Your guide pulls out a piece of bark cloth with intricate patterns painted in red and black. This, he says, is a dream map. The symbols don't resemble any map you've ever seen. Instead, there are spirals, dots, and repeated lines. He explains that each section corresponds to a portion of the voyage, not in geography, but in feeling. Here, he points, you might feel fear. Here, hunger. Here, joy. It's not about where you are. It's about what the ocean will ask of you. The idea isn't to predict every moment, but to be ready for them. Dreaming becomes preparation, an act of tuning your mind to future possibilities, like weather forecasting for the soul. You're quiet the rest of the day, turning it all over in your mind, not because it's strange, but because it's strangely logical. Every other sense is used. Why not dreams? That night, you lie down early. The thatched roof rustles slightly, whispering secrets. You let yourself drift, wondering whether you'll dream of an island or a bird or maybe just a splash of water across a canoe's prow. And if you do, you'll try to remember what it meant, because now you understand. Out here, even your sleep can steer a voyage. The canoe is ready. Its hull has been sealed with breadfruit sap, the lashings checked and rechecked, the sails trimmed from the finest woven pandanus leaves. Your hands brush the smooth edge of the prow, still damp from a final polishing with coconut oil and crushed charcoal. The stars are beginning to peek through the twilight above. Tonight, you launch, but there's no rush, because here, departure is a ceremony, not a stopwatch. Mainstream fact. In traditional Polynesian voyages, setting out wasn't just a logistical step. It was a sacred act tied to ritual, timing, and ancestral permission. The canoe was often blessed. Offerings might be made to the gods or the spirits of the sea. Sometimes a navigator would fast beforehand to sharpen their awareness, ensuring no internal storms would cloud their judgment on the open ocean. You Sit in a circle with the crew, your fellow students, your guide, an elder who once steered his canoe to an island barely marked on modern maps. Each person holds something small, a shell, a fishbone, a feather. These are tokens, humble but symbolic, gifts for the sea, fringe tidbit. Some traditions included burying a piece of coral beneath the canoe before launch, meant to anchor the voyage in clarity and peace. Others use songbirds as omens. If a particular bird called from the forest before dawn, it meant the gods approved. Historians still argue how widely such rites were practiced, or whether they were more myth than method. But it's undeniable, no one left shore without asking the ocean's permission first. The air feels charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm, except quieter. You can hear your own breathing, the soft shuffle of feet on sand, the rhythmic beating of a slit-log drum in the distance, its pulse steady, like a heartbeat. Your guide stands and begins a final chant, not loud, not theatrical, but low and calm, as though speaking directly to the stars. It isn't for you, not entirely. It's for the canoe, for the ancestors who once sailed and survived, for the winds who may or may not be in the mood to cooperate. Then, silently, everyone rises. The canoe is lifted, carefully carried to the waterline, where it meets the tide, like an old friend. You wade in barefoot, your fingers still gripping your small offering, a smooth piece of coral shaped like a question mark. You let it fall gently into the waves. It sinks slowly until it's gone. Now you're aboard. You settle in, muscles alert but calm. The night is full, the moon rising behind a haze. The crew moves without words. You notice the sail angle shift. The guide murmurs a few syllables you recognize from the chant he taught you 2 nights ago. You repeat them softly under your breath. They sound different now, truer. The canoe glides from shore. The waves welcome you with little resistance. The village recedes behind you like the closing scene of a slow film. You're not scared. You're open. A few hours pass. You see your first guiding star rise, bright and clear. You align yourself with it almost automatically, as if your body has already memorized the angle. The swell beneath you is long and even, barely noticeable unless you focus. You recall the teaching. A gentle curve from the east means you're on the northern route. You smile. You didn't need to check. You just knew. Far to the west, lightning flickers across the horizon. Not close, but visible. A reminder. Someone passes you a piece of dried banana wrapped in Thai leaf. You eat in. Silence. It's sweet. Your stomach settles. You begin to hear patterns now, beyond the drum of waves and creak of the canoe. The sea speaks in rhythm. 3 short pulses. A pause, then one long. You close your eyes and feel it in your spine. Somewhere back on land, the elder who taught you the swell chant would be pleased. Your guide nudges you gently. Landfall tomorrow, if the wind stays. Tomorrow? It doesn't feel like you've been at sea that long, but already your senses have reorganized themselves. You're not counting hours. You're counting swells, counting stars. Your mind drifts. You remember the dream you had last night. A single tree rising from a flat horizon, leaves blowing in a wind that wasn't there. Was it a real island? A memory? A sign? You think of all the people who came before you, those who crossed this same ocean with no compass, no motor, no metal hull, just bone memory, starlight, and the sound of waves in their ears. You're one of them now, in your own small way. You lean back against the canoe's edge, look up into the cosmos, and smile. You're not sure where exactly you're going, but you know you'll recognize it when you get there. And that, according to everything you've learned, is the true measure of a navigator. Wind down, 300 words. The sea is quiet now. The sails are down. The canoe drifts gently under a sky heavy with stars, each one a tiny pulse in the dark, as if the universe itself is breathing slowly, just like you are. You lie back, your head resting on the wooden deck. the scent of salt and woven palm lingering in the air. The waves no longer rock you. They hold you, as though the ocean has become a cradle. And for tonight, that's all it needs to be. The lessons of the voyage settle gently in your bones. You remember the rhythm of the swells, the whisper of the wind, the quiet confidence of a navigator reading the ocean like a book. You remember the chants, the stars, the tiny clues tucked into the sea's vastness. You feel the hush of the canoe still drifting forward, even now, not with urgency, but with trust. The island may be just beyond the horizon, or still days away, but it doesn't matter. You've learned the art of being still in motion, the quiet joy of direction, even when the destination is only a feeling. Somewhere behind your closed eyes, a constellation rises. You don't need to name it. You already know what it means. Let your thoughts fall away now, like coral slipping beneath the waves. Let the silence wrap around you, soft and slow. And if your dreams take you across water tonight, may they carry you gently on a course only you can follow, on a course only you can follow.